a mention of anthropological psychology. In fact, I'm not sure such a thing exists, but we'll run with it. It makes sense that they would include that here because anthropologists study culture, right? And so here we are in cross-cultural psychology. So top of page, for you folks, page 266 there, they tell us, our first notions of, not of personality, but of personality interacting with culture, come from anthropologists or cultural anthropologists. And not physical anthropologists who actually are Indiana Jones, right? But cultural anthropologists who study the products, the actual social products of man and mankind, I should say. They came up with this idea of national character, which sounds like something that you should tread carefully on. It sounds like thin ice on a very deep pond. But your textbook gives a nice treatment of this concept. It never gets perverse, and it never goes into the bad places. But this is what I mean, right? Basically, we're giving almost life and breath and permission to talk about cultural stereotypes. You realize that we're about to enter into that door, right? We're opening up that door. But no, we'll take a serious stance and say that anthropologists have gifted us with this concept of national character, that it does have a scientific definition, which is what? The perception, notice here, the perception, and in psychology, perception and reality are intertwined. So perception is just as good as reality. It's the perception that each culture has a modal personality type, and that most persons in that culture share aspects of it, if not being perfect representatives of it or archetypes of it. And so what's important here is to emphasize that statistical word that you almost never see in a sentence, the modal personality type. You guys talk to me here. What does that mean? We didn't say the mean. We didn't say the median. We said the mode. And you never realized that after Math 1200 that this concept would ever come back in your life again, did you? So remember here, what's mode? And it's, of course, the simplest of them, thankfully. It's the most often. So what they're saying here is that however you're slicing up personality, and we're going to slice it up by taking this dimensional trait level approach, it's basically going to be the most common, you measure all 300 million people in a culture, it's going to be the most common value or level on each of those traits. That's an interesting, intriguing idea. It makes you want to know, hey, I wonder what the modal American personality type is with this incredibly diverse multicultural society that we've crafted for ourselves. I know Melvin and I have had some interesting after-class discussions, and I thank him for that, and some others as well have been wondering, perhaps from the start here, my God, when you talk about this monolithic American culture, yes, we sort of know what you mean, and by the way, I'm part of that we sort of know what we mean when we say American culture, but on the other hand, that doesn't seem to hold up under any kind of scrutiny because we inherently recognize how diverse we are. That said, we know all about, we all have a concept of national pastime, right? And we all have bought hook, line, and sinker that part of that national character or national personality type is going to be someone who's individual. We've been sold it in movies for our entire lives and will be for generations, it's the rugged mountain person who's bucking the trends, right? That's the Old West. It's the same story over and over. It's the person who's going to stand up against adversity and fight for what they believe in. It's all about them, right? So we all have this idea, even if it's hard for us to buy. Maybe, by the way, because it's sort of ironic, right? It's a nation of individuals and we value individuality as the most, basically the prime directive in our culture. But at the same time, someone's coming, oh no, there's a cultural stamp called American, and you've got it, and you've got it, and you've got it. We don't like that, right? Because it somehow constricts our individuality. There's nothing about me that's predetermined, or that's environmentally stamped upon me. I am me. Well, right? I mean, of course we would have the most trouble with that. Any kind of hyper individualistic culture might. Well, just as a little preview here, we've already said we're going to use the trait approach to get at this idea of national character. Let's fast forward to figure 10.1, if you will.
question.
Oh, yes.
The model personality, would that be like, or the modal, would that be maybe like morals and ethics?
It could include that, but again, it's going to be something well defined that we have measures for, and although ethics and morality does obviously come into play in someone's personality makeup, it's going to be bits and pieces of those concepts that are captured in the different traits that we measure. So, I mean, those are inherent in some of the ideas about openness to experience and conscientiousness, but we don't measure that particularly include those ideas explicitly in our in our current concept of personality. But yeah, I mean, those ideas. Remember here, with the big five, it's those 5 dimensions that capture everything that's meaningful about how we differ and capture all of our behavioral differences. So it would include morality in there, just not specifically or explicitly. All right, so let's look at Figure 10.1. When we look at all 50 cultures, they keep referencing 51 cultures. I thought that was, even the title said 50 cultures. Anyways, Figure 10.1 shows, by the way, a horrible graphic program, because you have to read the caption in order to keep straight what this graph is getting at. On the x-axis, the horizontal axis that is, it's showing in this case, not modal, so it's slightly different, but not all that statistically different. It's showing the mean or average level of individuals from these different cultures, and I guess culture and country are conflated here. And we said back in chapter 1 we shouldn't do that, but we do it every chance we get. It's a young field. Remember, it's a young subdiscipline. It's the average level of individuals from each of these countries on extroversion. The vertical axis, the y-axis, refers to neuroticism, which is another way to characterize that in shorthand is emotional stability. All right? So it's putting these two against each other and plotting out where the countries fall. Interesting, when I look at this Figure 10.1, I can't see anything but a circle. It's quite interesting to me. I mean, like a wreath, right? I mean, does a circle emerge for you? Yeah. There's really not much in the center. It's almost like... it really is like a spiral. But it's almost as if, and I don't know if there's anything to this, I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head here. If you look in the middle of that, very few cultures, at least of the ones that have been studied, fall kind of middle on both of these traits in combination, which there might be something interesting there, I'm not sure. But anyways, a lot of different things you can get from this. First of all, you get, well, where does each of these cultures fall individually? And then you can also get some interesting things like, oh, look at the clusters here. Look at the things that cluster together. For instance, the Malaysians and the Chinese and the Indians and the South Koreans and the Filipinos all cluster together. That's interesting, isn't it? I mean, would you expect that? Maybe. I mean, geographically, very close, but certainly culturally not the exact same thing. And yet here, when we plot them on 2 dimensions, they look relatively similar. Same can be true of many of these African cultures. Check that out. Let's see. What else looks interesting to you folks? Iceland. First of all, do you agree where America is? America is just about the highest. Nay, it is the highest. It is scores highest on extroversion. So there's that. You guys are gregarious. You're outgoing. You want to be everyone's friend, and you smile all the time.
So basically, they're saying we're a bunch of savages.
Well, they're saying that, and then they say we middle on emotional stability, which, if you had to err on where you're going to be, in the middle is not so bad. We don't have an exceptional level of emotional stability, and we don't have an exceptional absence of it either. So it's almost like you can't say anything there. So mostly we're just outgoing, friendly people. I don't know how you get savages from that, but
The gregarious part.
Oh, okay, the gregarious part. Interesting. We're savage in our white smiles, and how we blind people with our fake smiles. Ding. Is this useful? Is this interesting to us? And then we can compare ourselves. Wow, who's near us? Canadians and Croatians, really close to us, on the same level of emotional stability, but only a little bit off from us on extroversion. What else do we have here? Spaniards. I don't know why I have to say it like that. Look at the Germans. The Germans fairly high on extroversion, incredibly low on neuroticism. Is that possible? Does that make sense? I don't know. I mean, it says low on emotional stability. Interesting. Look at the French. Ah, okay. Well, when you're comparing it with the French, look at the French. Highly neurotic, but middling on extroversion. Middling on extroversion. Does that make sense? Does that fit what we might call a national character? You think of French people as flamboyant people? Which part doesn't make sense? The being highly neurotic or being only middle on extroversion for French? What's the French stereotype? See, we're right there, cultural national stereotypes. They're sort of a little bit more reserved than you might think. You don't want to say? Apparently Christian doesn't want to say. He's smiling at me.
I work for two, my boss and owner are both French, and
Your boss and owner?
of the restaurant. I work at the Back Burner restaurant.
Oh, okay. So we shouldn't say anything more then, should we? Because this is what you depend upon for a living.
Not 100%, so I'm okay with that.
Oh, okay. What else do we have here?
She can attest. I mean, my manager, she's 62 years old, and you would think she was a 30-year-old. I mean, her personality
Very
is
outgoing,
very outgoing.
huge personality.
She'll tell you exactly how it is.
Check this out. Situation difference, right? And also, we can't ignore the fact that, people gravitate and find environments and niches in their environments that fit them. And so she might not be a typical or good representative of the French culture, or maybe she is, I don't know.
Well, she'll tell you that she doesn't like dealing with the French because she doesn't like the French.
Oh, so although
She
she's
thinks they have terrible personalities anyway, so.
ask her. Do you mind? Ask her. What do you mean by the French have terrible personalities? Is it because they're
You're
not?
gonna get a colorful answer.
That's what we would. No colorful answers. No, just clean it up for us and report back if you think about it. Anyways, one thing we could do is, the clustering's interesting. We could debate where the different findings are. Who's right in the middle? The Lebanese and the Turks, and the Peruvians, and the Kuwaitis, and where are the Swiss on this? Who's the least extroverted? People from Uganda. Now, I don't have much experience, or Ethiopia. They just score really low on extroversion, apparently. Okay. People from Russia. Moroccans.
I could see Russia.
I don't know. I don't know.
What was your experience?
Well, you also have to realize is that, when we're dealing with people, like for instance, our cultural stereotype of the French could be changed by the fact that, well, we're largely experiencing their culture as a known quantity that's, having a cultural exchange here, right? And so there might be cultural messages within the cultures that help to mask or downplay or in some cases maybe magnify. But, my experience with the Moroccans is incredibly friendly and welcoming and,
But is that only because you were outside?
Exactly.
That's what you're saying.
Exactly. So, what do I really know, right? I haven't just sat on a street corner in disguise watching them not being extroverted to each other, according to this graph, right? Chinese and Japanese fairly low on extroversion. Japanese much higher than the Chinese on neuroticism. Interesting. Now, again, well, that's what we're arguing here. She says, is that kind of their cultural style? Is that reflected here?
That really does reflect it, because they're taught to, that whole smiling, the accent.
Okay, yeah, for sure the Japanese, right, from that one study that we had.
A harsh culture.
Yeah, what would be nice is if we could get a representative from these cultures who's also a psych major and has been, at least listened to some of the conversations that we've had, who could give us an insider's view, right? But again, does the American one make sense? Obviously we're all qualified to report on it, and I'm not sure that. Certainly we all agree we're pretty extroverted, right? Or at least we're encouraged to. In fact, one of the problems in our society is being shy. That's considered a problem temperament or personality, right? Is to be shy. There's certainly lots of shy people, and they're not too happy about all the demands placed upon them to not be that way, to not be so introverted. All right. So, anyways, stepping back from this, one thing we can take from this is this would be a psychometric approach to kind of doing what the anthropologists started with this idea of national character. How are you folks feeling on this? Obviously, I've shown you I'm a little bit uncomfortable with it, but watch me double and triple down on that discomfort in just a second. I think it's fascinating, this concept of national character, and I think it's fascinating that we could attempt to test it. And so let me point out to you, there is a required reading for you. And so now he punishes us for our attention. Teresiano et al., 2005. Fantastic study. Read the abstract, read the summary, just glance at the graphs, and I will lecture on the important parts. We'll pick up there next time to say a little bit more about national character. So that is a new thing for you to take a peek at. But the other thing is, in case you don't know exactly what we mean, and in case you're too comfortable with the concept of, yeah, there's a national such a thing as natural character. It does leave its mark on every person in that culture to varying degrees, but it's not everything. I mean, that's a very nice kind of way to leave that. I don't want you to be so comfortable. I want you to think for a second that, again, this idea that, wait, I don't want my culture to write all over me and to constrain me in any way. I want to be who I am, right? I don't want my culture to tell me what to do. And
But isn't that, I think we talked about
Isn't that the
this
point?
at the beginning. I mean, that's a cultural norm in itself, to want to be confident, everybody wanting to be an individual.
yeah, that's part, and that's one of the ironies of our culture in this particular discussion, I think, too. Well, what do I have for you? I have a couple supplementals, and one of them is let's step away from looking at the concept of culture or nation, and instead look at this from an economic standpoint. Is there such thing, not of national character, but of social class character? And of course, this is sort of an ancient idea. It's the basis for a caste system. It's the basis for a class structure, and this concept has existed for centuries. It's not something that we're all that comfortable talking about in America because we're all supposed to be equal, right? Equality and equal opportunity. Equal opportunity for sure, and we're hoping to make that. I mean, that is the law. It's the law of the land, but we don't like calling someone high class or low class, but somehow we're all comfortable with the idea of middle class because it means that it's just like everybody else. It's just standard. It's what you do. I wish I could pull the number out right now. It seems like I should, but my brain is so full of different numbers and percentages right now. But let me ballpark it. Something like, and I hope you guys will smile at this, something like 70 or 80, maybe it's as high as 85% of Americans think of themselves as middle class. Right? That's funny, because it's just not possible, right? Middle class would be, it implies what's typical, what's average, maybe the middle 50%, right, from the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile on whatever it is that you're measuring. Well, a big part of it's going to be income and lifestyle. And so, that's only 50%, yet 20 to 35% more Americans count themselves in there, including people who are for sure poor and people who are for sure wealthy. Say, no, I'm middle class. So apparently it's something that people want to be, right? Well, remember what our big picture here is. Is there a personality type? Is there a lifestyle type? Is there a behavioral package that comes with being middle class? And just to give you some definitions and some ideas of what that might look like and how that might differ from your ideas of the middle class, we have this little quiz here that I think is just invaluable. You hear all the time about the middle class. Here's some cold and hard figures on what the absolute median person and median family in our country, what they look like on an economic and lifestyle point. A little uncomfortable? Thank you. You're welcome. Right? All right. So, by the way, before I ever started to study psychology, got into grad school, or started to think about things like this, I was certainly had an idea of what middle class was, and it differed dramatically from what this suggests. All right, so what do we have here? I'm middle class, you're middle class. It seems like I should probably get closer so I could actually read it. All right. Income and other living standards. Okay, that's lifestyle is what we're talking about. So are you middle class or not? Do you eat bacon in a cast iron pan? For the 50% of families in the middle of the scale, so this is statistically 25 to 25th to 75th percentile, with right smack in the middle would be the median person, median family. Household income to count as middle class is starts at $51,000 and goes up to $123,000 a year. It's a little different than I used to think middle class was. For sure.
Is that 2 parents working?
The median is, well,
Or for a household?
that's even part of this, is it's gonna be nearly 2.0 people working, right? So it's not per capita income, it's household income. So it's 4 to 5 people. So what counts as a typical household, what's the composition, what's the typical number of people working? The median, right, this is, if you're having, I'm not assuming you're having trouble with this, but this is where you always get the age-old joke, oh, there's 1.8 children in every household, right? Where'd they do with the other 0.2 of that person, right? Don't laugh at that, okay? So the median household income is $81,000 a year. So if you make $75,000 a year, you're a little bit below the median. You're in the bottom 50% of households in America. I mean, these are things that shock you, that give you goosebumps. Okay. Those numbers are from 2008, and so they've fallen since then because obviously that was before the Great Recession. Next up, so that just gives us a very blunt, and does a set of lifestyle choices and behaviors come and kind of aggregate or congregate with these ideas? Housing costs, the average, the typical home, the median home, is about $231,000 a year. Wow. And the other thing is to look at regional differences. Macon is not going to be typical in this regard. San Francisco is not going to be typical in this regard in the other direction, right? So the other thing, we were right back to where we always are. Well, where is this fictional middle America place? Well, maybe, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely places where the median house is worth $231,000, and I'm sure there's some of the suburbs around Atlanta where these are good snapshots. Wow, that's a lot of money. That's a $250,000 house. And so you wonder, people in other countries, when they think about America, this is the stuff they have a sense of, or worse, because they see movies with mansions and things and Bentleys. What else do we have here? The median size of a new single-family home jumped by 40% in my lifetime to about 2,300 square feet. So if you're living in less than 2,300 square feet, you're in the bottom 50%. Whew, it's a little uncomfortable. But really uncomfortable last year when I taught this class, when the whole Zuccotti Park, Occupy Wall Street movement was in full swing. That was a little dangerous to be talking about some of this stuff. But we can have a level head about it. What else do we have here? The average American family, 2-parent family, spends $5,100 per year on health insurance. Ooh, wow. I spend more than that. And when you count the employer contributions, health insurance is like $15,000-$16,000 a year proposition for a family. So, I mean, that's why people, we're done with politics. I mean, that's why people talk about healthcare, and that's why it's such a big issue. Cars. Typical family, oh my goodness, American family in the middle class spends about $12,400 per year on 2 medium-sized sedans or the equivalent, with a new car value of $45,000. Where do you get one? What is that? What would that be? I've never seen a car cost $45,000. This isn't even a typical car. New car costs $45,000. That's a BMW.
Yeah, that's a Cadillac.
That's a Cadillac. That's a really nice, expensive SUV. I don't even think Nissan makes a car that even costs that much. Do they? But anyways, that number has always seemed off to me, and I've been looking at this for a little while. I sort of doubt that $45,000, unless that's like the retail value, and somehow, you know how you could buy a truck for like almost half of what it actually is worth.
How
Okay.
old is this?
2008. But it's very hard to find a nice condensed list like this. I mean, you have to pour through government charts that are horrible to find anything like this. So that's why I wish they maybe would update it. But it wouldn't be that far off. The typical family puts aside $4,100 for college expenses for 2 kids. I always wanted to show this to my dad. Say, hey, Dad, times 18 years, I think you owe me. What is that? $72,000? Can you sue your parents if they didn't live up to the middle class average? These are tough, tricky questions. What else do we have here? 1 week at the beach. So there's even giving us an idea here that something about the middle class personality buys into at an aggregate level this level of vacation every year. 1 week at the beach or another destination is standard, and that's actually lower than many countries in the world. We're known as hardworking people as a culture, as a nation, because we only take 1 week of vacation a year. And it costs roughly $3,000. So if you're somehow cheaping out and going to Stone Mountain for a week and going camping and only spending $500, you could get sued by your kids someday. All right. Look at more affluent families. So at the higher end, above 50%, approaching that 75% number, take $6,000 vacations every year. Whew. Anyways, I don't want to torture you too much. Let's see what else looks interesting. Retirement savings. No, this is just a litany of depressing statistics. The median income family saved 3.2% of its income. Doesn't seem like that much. Roughly equivalent to the national savings rate, and would sock away about $2,600 per year for retirement. All right, over 40 years and compound interest. So that gives you some rough peg estimates for that. How much do they spend on clothes, food, utilities, entertainment? $14,000. This is always interesting when you see the different regional breakdowns. Like for instance, New York City. I mean, if you live in Manhattan, you spend. These numbers would be a little bit out of date, but something like $12,000 a year on food. That most of that takeout in restaurants. That's per household. I mean, that's insane if you think about it, right? How many trips to Bonefish Grill would that get you? You can eat there every day, I think, for $12,000. But anyways, that's what they're doing. So, is there a middle class culture? Is there a set of things that come along with it, behavioral tendencies and characteristics that support this sort of middle of the road approach to life? And then how would you quantify it? Well, this is just the beginning. Here's something else. What about based on race or ethnicity? And so I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before. I've always thought this was fascinating. I always thought it was interesting that it didn't cause more of an outcry. Where is it? So that's a typical average American. Where is it? Oh, cultural stereotypes. Here we are. Interesting. Wait, let's look at this here just to see. I didn't see this before. Okay. Oh, yeah. This is the typical diet for the American. In case you're curious, and it's frightening if you look at it. Not necessarily in a bad way. It's just holy crap. We eat 31 pounds of cheese per capita. How much milk we drink. I mean, I just hope that's. I thought they had bananas separate from fruit. Look, we eat 273 pounds. I mean, these.
We drink 24 pounds of coffee.
Listen to this. Personality is inherently about aggregation and about averaging out across situations in time. And so it's interesting when you start to put numbers to that concept and see, well, what does aggregate behavior on an individual level look like if you rough it out or average it out over a year? And sometimes you do get some crazy things to think about. Does that say popcorn? From my angle here, this looks like it's a popcorn.
Yeah, that's corn syrup.
Oh, corn syrup. Okay, it looks like popcorn to me. But it's just, it says sweeteners though, doesn't it? No, this is the average American. The average American.
Corn is separate. They have it right next to.
Oh, they broke out corn.
58 pounds.
So corn's important to our diet. What is this? Is this tomatoes? No, that's vegetables. What is this? Looks like a microphone. Okay, that's the coffee one. Poultry. Notice that cheese is so important that it's considered, they break it out from dairy. What is this here?
Wheat flour.
Wheat flour. So this Look at this, 36, average age is 36, and the average weight is 190 pounds for a man, 164 pounds for a woman, and this is the diet that supports that. All right, so again, aggregate behavior, tying numbers to it. Not numbers now, but how about getting really, really specific? Some of you have heard about this before. Right? So, this is the same kind of argument. You're just going to say, well, that entire culture, that entire nation has its own characteristic ways of being. Well, you can look at different ways to group people. One way to group people is based on social class or socioeconomic status, if you will. Another way is to group people based on gender. So this could be, stuff women do, right? But that's such a tired thing that people for stand-up comedians for forever have been doing that. Here is, stuff white people like, right? So this is based on race or ethnicity, in this case, just specifically race. And here's the thing. You can look at these behaviors, and there's hundreds of examples of that they say the typical white person does this or behaves in this way or enjoys this or shows this preference. You can look at these and you say, that's not true at all. And that's sort of what we mean, right? Is that national character or racial character or gender character, it's not prescriptive and it's not rigid. It doesn't say you have to do this. It just says that there's a tendency and that there's going to be people who are better representatives than others. I have to tell you, I'm a little bit biased. The first time I saw this site, by the way, you know how I found out about this site? Just from hearing people talking about it. It was like a sensation for about 2 weeks, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And people wouldn't stop talking about it. They published a book. They're millionaires now. And the origin of this is something like 4 guys who were like college roommates were just hanging out in a bar. And I guess one of them didn't show up for the event or for the meeting. They're like, I wonder what he's doing. And they started like riffing on this idea. Well, he's probably wearing his New Balance sneakers and watching ESPN and eating this or doing that or listening to this kind of music. And they're like, oh my God, we've got something here, right? They're basically just playing off of a stereotype of what someone in their mid-20s who's an urban white male would be doing. And so, women, fair enough to ask, does this represent what, white women, for example? It's about identity politics. All right, let's go to home here. You can read about this. I've also asked before, is this racism? It's certainly privileging the idea of race, but let me give you an idea. Where's the list? It probably must be at the top here. Full list. Just to give you an idea of what we're talking about and how specific this is. So instead of pegging numbers to it, this gives other things. White people, and they do it in orders. The white people love Conan O'Brien. They like to wear Ray-Bans. I don't know what Banksy is. They like to go camping. They love Where the Wild Things Are, that book. Notice how some of this is sort of the moment. They love the show Mad Men. They love anything to do with the TED Conference. Here's a little bit of my bias. The first time I ever went to this site, Note, for the record, lots of nervous laughter and giggling is going on in this room right now. So, check this out. Hello? Check this out. I've never lost control of this is the first time. This is like a big moment for us. I've never lost control of this room before. And I have to get in the way and maybe turn off the projector and stuff. This is fascinating to me.
I want to see what number 1 through 10 are.
Hold on a second. Let me talk some words. Let me string some words together. Okay, ready? Can I tell you my damn story? No. The first time I went to this, I'm like, I'm so sick of hearing about stuff white people like, and no. The item for that week was white people love New Balance sneakers. And I'm sitting there wearing New Balance sneakers, and I'm like, how do they know that? And then I kept running, and the other thing was they love to go to coffee shops. I'm like, oh my God. So let's see what the first 10 are, the original ideas. They love coffee.
Religion's
They
their
love
parent.
film festivals. But one of my questions is going to be, obviously there might be people who are better representative of this than others. But there's also, they have in mind a very specific demographic here.
How is Asian girls number 11?
These are all trends. You notice, you notice many of these trends are
And
from
number
like 5
14,
years ago.
having black fur. This
Why don't
list
we
is
click on
Add
this
it to
one here?
last name.
Which one's your
Why not?
Nice.
And they explain it each time here. Because white people are afraid that if they don't like them, they'll be called racist. Unbelievable, right? And then they have a whole thing here. Well, then apparently these are all comments. Not necessary. This is the internet, after all.
That was colorful.
They
How
want
about
gifted
here?
children?
Why not? I mean, the race is everywhere in this.
Okay, we
White
got-
people love to have black
We got
friends.
Brooklyn too. This is
Now,
Manhattan,
here's the thing, this
Brooklyn,
is
too.
something I have to take another peek at. Oh yeah, okay, so this, I don't know why they didn't have it for the Barack Obama one, but they usually have a paragraph or two of supporting kind of exposition on it. And so this is an interesting little statement on perceived race relations in, post-2000. Let's see. So look at this here. They get so specific here. They say, the number of black friends white people possess also illustrates their comfort with black culture. Here's a handy guide. If you have 1, you're the white novice. If you have 2, the white black club goer. 3 to 4, the white BET-er. See Justin Timberlake, Robin. I don't know who some of those people are.
Understand.
And
size
And
and
Vietnamese
Impossible. I mean, it's really, some of this is also kind of nasty.
Horrible.
So
Absolutely horrible.
here's the thing. This has anyone heard of this before?
No.
Well, here's the
Or else I
thing.
would read the whole
Here-
list.
Yeah, here's the thing. This exists. They made millions off of this idea. They were on Jon Stewart.
Not even
They
two
made
billion.
CNN. I mean, this ran the circuit for about 4 or 5 years ago. And yeah, I mean, you see the date on this. And it's since obviously died down, although it looks like they're still adding every now and then a few things. I think they note somewhere in here that we're no longer updating it. The white people love microbreweries. And some of this is like basically my 20s, revisiting my 20s. But when did they add the TED conference? Let's see. Because that seems to be a recent thing. You can't stop hearing about it. 2010. So they stopped updating this 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
Don't.
But it's surprising you haven't heard about this before. But in any event, I was shocked by it. I think it is edgy. It does open up some kind of a discussion about stereotypes and is there a typical kind of modal set of behaviors associated with different social groupings, in this case race. Worth at least thinking about and figuring out what your reaction is to it, right? How truthful it is. But it's really no different than looking at the middle class and saying, aha, look what the middle class does on a purely in economic and lifestyle terms. Or for that matter, what do we know about people in Japan? Well, they're moderately neurotic and not very extroverted, right? I mean, yes, it's a different level of intensity and a slightly different reaction, but it's the same exact idea. So, national character, a fascinating idea. We're going to take another look at it. Let me point out just a couple other things here to you. World Color Survey data? Just kidding. Other perspectives than the anthropological one. Well, the one that we're going to spend on probably the first third of the class next time I'm talking about, other than putting to rest this idea of national character. And by the way, that Teresiano paper has some fascinating graphs in it, which attempt to show for each of the big five traits, for each of those 5 traits, what the average American looks like. And then that gives us a little bit more to argue about, which will be quite fun. So the second major perspective is that trait approach, and that's the McCrae 50 culture study. We'll say a few more things about that in a little bit more detail, and then we'll actually modify our discussion of it. The third and final perspective is the cultural psychology perspective, which, I'll point out, this class could have been called cultural psychology. Instead, it was called cross-cultural psychology. And we sort of we attempted to explain that back in the introduction to the course back in August. But what you have here is that really one of the only places in this course where there's a discussion of what cultural psychology is and how it might differ from cross-cultural psychology. And the basic idea there is that cultural psychology focuses on the uniqueness and the individuality of the psychological functioning within each cultural grouping, which is which is a certain slant and bias of its own. It's basically saying there is no corroboration. You have to get inside of each culture and learn how it works, all the little nooks and crannies of that culture. Whereas remember, in cross-cultural psychology, we're taking a little bit more conservative stance, and we're saying, well, there's got to be something that's universal across cultures. So let's pretend to start with that idea, and then see what's the same, if there is anything, and then search for differences. So it is a dramatically different approach. One thing I want to point out to you is, listen to this here. This approach, that is the cultural psychology approach, sees culture and personality not as separate entities, but as a mutually constituted system in which each creates and maintains the other. Where have we heard that before? Everywhere. That's the right answer. She said, pause. Everywhere. Thank you so much for that. It's basically saying, guess what? Personality and culture, not so fast. They're the same thing. No, we already said that with language. We already said that with emotions. We already said that with cognitions. And now they're trying to sneak it in again. Well, the cultural psychology approach does say that you can't have one without the other. We're not going to go quite that far because we're going to take the cross-cultural approach, which is what we will continue next time. Thank you, people. You guys are awesome. Let me give you that page number just a second. That is, you have to go back a little bit. That is page 267. Bottom of 266, top of page 267.